again, thank you so much to the panelists here today and Ben, who's dialed in. I'm going to kick off with the very first question that was posed to us earlier, and that's in relation to SIM swaps and the measures that organizations can take in servicing their clients, in managing their own organizations to protect themselves from this menace. Perhaps, Gus, I'm going to start with you, if I may, because as a bank, we face this threat every day, and perhaps I can get some complimentary comments from Dan, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Thank you. Go for it.
Thanks, Rato. And SIM swap is a very real threat. It's happened. It happened, and internally, as a bank, we are trying to discourage the use of SMS OTPs in signing of transactions or in the event of logging on to a financial system to do your banking. We recently moved from a physical sort of authentication method to a digital authentication method utilizing a mobile app that then relies on your credentials, be they biometric credentials, an app code that then validates that you are the human that is accessing the system. And typically what we've seen is people don't realize that if their phone is not working, that potentially they have been SIM swapped. And that was the case a couple of years ago. Financial transactions were taking place. OTPs were going out to individuals, but they were never getting them. Fraudsters were very common. Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first approach, to negate SIM swap is to not use SMS as a security protocol. It's not a security protocol. It's not encrypted. Data can be intercepted, and SIM swap is a very common form of attack to SMS. So, actually, always the first port of call is to try and minimize the use of SMS in anything to do with security. And the other issue there is that the control here is not within the organization providing the security layer, so a bank, for example, but it's with the telco themselves. It's down to them to monitor and police that, and they do what they can. But in the end, if you don't have control around the security solution, maybe that's not the solution for you.
That's true.
Thank you. I'm going to stay with you, Dan, if I may,
Sure.
Because the next question is slap bang in your area of expertise. It goes as follows: how can we raise awareness about the risks of deep fake imagery or voice spoofing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the world of AI and deepfake it's little understood at the moment by the general public, and there's a lot of fear around this technology that's coming. But as I already mentioned, there are already ways that we can look into this. So one, just having an awareness in general, good user education is always a good starting point when it comes to security. And it's not always the easiest thing to do because you are getting into sometimes complex processes, but just an understanding that just because you're hearing a voice that sounds like somebody, we are now getting into the world of the movies where in the past you'd see someone have a voice change. Well, now computers are able to effectively do that. So we are getting into that world. So people's imaginations of what was real in films is now becoming what's real in real life. So it's about making sure that there is a basic education that these things can be spoofed, and you can't just trust something based on what you're hearing and what you're seeing with a picture, but you need additional layers of security. So this is where, as a consumer, you might have to authenticate to your bank. Well, maybe we need ways for your bank to also authenticate to you.
So, and sorry, Rot, if I could interject, Dan, with this AI and voice replication technology,
yeah,
are our technology, a lot of organizations of moving to voice recognition
Absolutely.
in speaking to the faceless client at the end of the telephone line.
Yeah,
Is that under threat?
potentially. But as I mentioned in the presentation there, there's already tools that can differentiate the difference between a voice coming from a vocal cords and a voice coming from a speaker. So if you're getting the initial input, you can usually run some sort of checks against that, just to see if that voice is genuine or if it's being created somehow digitally, or even just a pre-recording, in the old-fashioned way of doing things.
Yeah.
Some pre-recording someone's voice and putting it together.
Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to direct the next question to Nicholas, if I may. It goes as follows. Are there communities or forums which an organization could join to keep abreast of the latest evolving techniques and advancements within cybersecurity and fraud-related attacks?
Many of them, and I think that Ben could help, but it's a topic which is more and more interesting. When I started in that business, statistic from fraud in the physical world used to come from the police, and statistic from fraud on the digital world come from the vendors of solution to fight this fraud. Now it's changing quite a lot. You've got a lot of forum. I think Dan and Ben, they could share a list of good blogs and forums you could use and open to the public. And after that, okay, not too much time with Ben because you could become a hacker, but yeah, but you've got a lot of many.
Ben, any supplementary thoughts on your side?
In most countries, there is actually typically national cybersecurity organizations that, depending on the country, may actually set up information sharing networks. So definitely have a look around at your local cybersecurity organizations on a national level, because there might already be some kind of information sharing networks active. Other than that, in some countries, even banks are starting to set this up among themselves, where they have started collaborating and sharing information. So sometimes, as a business or as a financial institution, you can actually, try to collaborate and set this up yourselves as well if you haven't already. We see that it's finally picking up in some countries, but yeah, I know it's not an easy thing to do.
And Rato, if I could supplement, in South Africa, there are forums between the bank, including the security agencies in the country, to combat fraud. There are specific companies that, and depending on your budget as an organization, you can task with securing your online profile on the dark web. So basically, these companies spend their time trawling the dark web, looking for chatter, looking for groups that talk about your company, right? And then they highlight those. We've had instances in the past where we picked up chatter on the dark web that talked about some of our clients, talked about us as a bank, and we then put measures in place to combat that. So there are companies that specialize in this, and it's one of those things, it costs money, unfortunately. And as a bank, we do try and offer that service to clients on a consultative basis, where we can go in and talk to them, and we include our cybersecurity team in those conversations.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next question, I'm going to stay with you, Ben, if I may. And it goes as follows. What are, and this is given your decade-long in fraud, strategy fraud investigation, what are some of the common signs or indicators that may suggest the presence of internal collusion? Is there a proactive way to detect and investigate suspicious activities or behaviors?
Oh, that's a tough one. It's
other than gut instinct, of course, Ben. Other than your gut instinct.
Yeah. It's hard to give a silver bullet answer to that one, right? Because the ability for collusion is so widespread, and there's so many different variations that I don't think I can actually tell you, this is an obvious sign of collusion. I'm afraid it's not that simple. There are obviously things you can do, right, in terms of monitoring and behavioral profiling, which you should do for your customers, but you should also do that for your employees, especially depending on the kinds of privileges they have within the organization and the things they can do. It makes a lot of sense to monitor that. And in some institutions, they even have a kind of special investigations unit that specializes in only investigating their own staff and monitoring their own staff. But yeah, I feel the pain because I know it's a very common and very difficult thing to deal with. And unfortunately, I can't just tell you, hey, do this, and then you're going to be fine, because it doesn't work like that. There's so many different things involved that it's really hard to do that.
Thank you, Ben.
And Rato, apologies, I keep supplementing.
Go ahead. Gus.
But practically, right, as an organization, look at the people that you employ and who has the keys. So who can do what and cause you financial gain or financial loss, right? And that's typically where you'd start, right? And then you say to yourself, okay, if that is where the power sits in terms of the financial transactions, how do I split that power? Right, and you add an additional segregation of duties, for example. That doesn't stop collusion, but you start creating maybe it's a third or fourth level of segregation of duties. Because remember, collusion requires one or two people to come together to do something. Add a third person, you're now trying to convince a third person in on your criminal activity. Add a fourth layer, or add someone that's outside the department. Say, for example, it's the creditors department and they're making vendor payments. Final release, let it be made by procurement or someone in procurement, so that you split the locus of control and between your organization. And again, it does depend on how large organization is and how many people you have in that organization that you can do that. And then lifestyle audits, guys are getting money under the table, they're buying the new yacht. Ask the question.
Great, thank you. We have further questions online. Can those be presented, please?
Thanks, Rato. The first question, is the new move to digital authentication or app code compatible on all phones?
I'll take that one, Rato. Yes. It's digital authentication is compatible on all phones, both the Apple iOS and the Android and the Huawei phones. So yes, it is, and we do encourage our clients to move as quickly as possible to adopt digital authentication, because at least with digital authentication, if you're using, let's say, face recognition or fingerprint scan, it is your credentials that you're using that can't be compromised. And it also has that liveness indicator, for example, that it uses on your phone. So it's not just a picture that somebody's putting on or scanning to authenticate you to the application.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Is Standard Bank re-looking at their various systems in which they generate email from to assist clients in identifying valid emails by conforming to email security standards like SPF, DKIM, and DMARC?
Gus, you'd have to make an attempt at this one.
I'll have to field that one. Look, I'm not a specialist in the email world, but we have a team of over 700 employees at Standard Bank that focus on cybercrime, email being one of them. We monitor all emails coming into the organization and going out to from the organization, and that they conform to certain standards. We do also blacklist email or domains that we know that are malicious domains to ensure that we no longer get emails from those illegal domains. Having identified an illegal domain or a domain purporting to be a domain from a client, we engage the client on an on a one-to-one basis, and we ask them to go through the proper authorities to have those domains taken down and made obsolete. Reality is and these two gentlemen can confirm, as soon as we've closed down one domain and another one pops up, it's a constant fight to close these domains down. But what we can do is we can put a frequently asked questions process after the seminar, and we'll answer that question specifically as it relates to emails and the ask in the question.
Thank you. One last question.
Yes, please. What are the views of password managers? LastPass was rated as a top brand, but recently got hacked. What checks or criteria should one look for when selecting a password manager?
I'm open to any of the panelists putting their hand up for that one. I'll happily start on this one. And Ben, feel free to chip in as well. Password managers are inherently a useful tool. They allow you to create new and randomized passwords for everything. However, the issue you have with a password manager is it's usually locked down by a single password. And the strength of your password manager will be how you access it. Now, obviously, if you can use one that uses multi-factor, more's the better. But then again, the other issue you have with password managers is how is that data stored and where is it stored? If it's cloud-based, which it usually is, because that makes it more useful, then how is that being stored and is that being stored correctly? And that's something that you can't always find out.
But it beats.
Yeah, I'll add to that as well.
Still, yeah, still better than paper.
I bring them up in my presentation as well. So the reason I typically promote them to some extent is because the most common thing to happen is one of your passwords in maybe some random account that you barely ever use for something really silly, that website gets breached, that password and those credentials get stolen, and those then get reused somewhere else, right? That's the most common thing. So having different passwords for every account is of course a very good defense measure against that, because it makes password reuse obsolete. Like Dan said, checking all the security details of a password manager can be a bit difficult, especially since most of them will be cloud-based. You do have alternatives that you can host yourself on your own laptop or PC. So if you really don't want to use a cloud-based solution, it's possible to stay away from that, and then you have full control. Of course, it's mandatory almost to use two-factor authentication to access your password manager. Otherwise, I wouldn't consider it a secure solution. And then finally, as I said in my presentation as well, even though you use a password manager, it's not an excuse not to use 2FA when you can, because password is still a weak protection mechanism by itself. So you should always complement with 2FA if you can. And as it becomes more widespread, it'll be easier to have it on even smaller websites. But all the major and important accounts today will already have 2FA available.
And just one last thing to add to that on the 2FA element there. Both Apple and Google are pushing very strong pass keys, which is getting away from passwords. There is a very strong drive at the moment from many organizations, including OneSpan, as part of a FIDO alliance to try and get passwords out of the general use case, and with the organizations like Google and Apple behind them, hopefully we'll see that really start to ramp up massively. So maybe a password manager may become an ancient technology in the not too distant future.
Fascinating. So on that note, hearty thanks to you all, and we'll see you on the next occasion. Thank you.